Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology, and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com. Hello everyone, welcome to SciTech Culture. My name is Ben Warner and I'm joined by my good friend and colleague Steve Kern to talk about the 10th anniversary of the release of the original iPhone. It's hard to believe it was a scant 10 years ago. It seems like the whole world's different or something now. We're running around with these devices, and so many behaviors have changed, haven't they? We're even using an iPhone right now to record this podcast. So, interesting times, I guess. I guess it's an important milestone and a reflection of a pivot in the way, I guess, personal computing went after the iPhone was released. I think you could argue that the iPhone or the smartphones that the iPhone inspired since its release have become the primary computing device for most people, as opposed to the traditional laptop or desktop PC. So if nothing else, that's fairly significant, I would have thought.
Oh, yeah, it's like I was going to say, I'm surprised we didn't foresee the 10th anniversary of the iPhone way back in 2007. Not very good futurists. But, look, it's an amazing piece of kit, I guess, and that's what's just crazy about it. It's come from what appears to be nowhere, and in 10 years it's revolutionised our world. I think the other thing, though, not to forget about the iPhone, is that it was born at the same time as the GFC. And as we were saying, I think in an earlier ep, there's been a big transition since then. There's been disruption economically, socially, thanks to the iPhone. And I think, they're big drivers. That's why the world in 2017 is so different to how it was when the iPhone first came out.
Well, just as an example of that is the amount of... It truly is that all-in-one device, and obviously the iPhone kicked it off, but there are obviously Android phones that do the same thing, where they've come. I will save that for another time. But it's about the fact that these devices have replaced so many individual pieces of technology. So the point-and-shoot camera, for instance, doesn't really have any necessary function anymore. If you were going to buy a camera, you'd get a DSLR or above to make it worth your while. Otherwise, why would you be carrying a second piece of equipment around? A GPS unit, music player, video player, banking, internet, email. It's almost hard to believe that before that, companies were really coming up with actually distinct devices to do each of these individual things, as opposed to having them all in one.
Well, it wiped them all out. You remember the the TomTom and the Garmin, and everyone was putting them in their cars, and wow, it was amazing. And now everyone's got Google Maps on their phone, or maybe some use Apple Maps, but I still wouldn't recommend that.
No.
And then you have a look, and there were all sorts of things that now can be just used via an app, and you can download that app and use it anywhere.
One thing I did want to mention in this discussion on the iPhone, you mentioned that it's seemingly coming out of nowhere, and it can probably seem like a lot from the outside that it did, but actually if you go back and look at the history of the development of computers, Apple's history, I guess even Microsoft's history, that it didn't really... It was like a slow burn to that point. There's a story about a guy at Microsoft that pissed off Steve Jobs by keeping on shoving this tablet in Steve Jobs' face, saying, "This is what we're doing, and it's going to be great." And Jobs apparently went back to the office and said, "Screw this guy, we're going to show him how it's done," and started on the iPad, which then morphed into the iPhone first. But it was a culmination of a lot of years of work. And if you actually think about what Steve Jobs' design philosophy was, it actually is best encapsulated by the iPhone rather than their traditional product, the Mac, at least as far as I can see.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with that. You know, it's but the way it came around. Do you remember the iPod was already doing fantastically well at that point, and then I remember someone, they leaked, Apple's going to make a phone, and everyone was like, oh wow, Apple's going to make a phone. It was pretty obvious it was going to be an iPod with an antenna in it and a speaker, but I think everyone was still amazed when it came out, and it was just so much better. That iPhone, because it came out as the 3, didn't it? The 3G.
Well, it didn't even have 3G. Well, that's another thing to discuss too. That original iPhone actually wasn't that functional.
It wasn't that good, no, but it was such a step in the right direction. It was really like they released a prototype.
Yeah,
and it was just so much better to, in terms of what phones were at that point. And then I remember, they brought out the 3GS, I think, which was the updated one. And then suddenly that's where it took off, because that was functional at that point. Then they followed up with the iPhone 4 and, the rest, as they say, history.
Yeah, and it took off. The interesting thing in looking back at it, in Australia, we didn't ever see the original iPhone. I believe it only got released in the US and maybe Canada the first run. So other than, I don't know, seeing it pop up on the previous episodes of The Big Bang Theory as a maybe product placement, where we haven't actually seen it ourselves, but it's interesting that, apparently that first iPhone only sold 6 million units, which for Apple at the time probably was a lot, and now they probably ship that in a week. That's astounding. And although you can't argue against the fact that there probably won't be, at least not until another major technological shift takes us somewhere else, there won't be another moment like that where the iPhone was introduced, and that feeling of, wow, we've now entered a new era. We've had iterations since then, and people have been whinging and complaining that, what have they done for us lately? Why isn't it, where's the wow factor? And there isn't any, because they did it, and now it's just refinement.
Oh, exactly. And look, there's been a lot of refinement over the last 10 years, but if you really boil it down, the iPhone is essentially, in terms of the way it works, essentially the same as it was, 10 years ago, which is how amazing it was 10 years ago. Sure, now you've got the Press Touch and all sorts of other features in there, and the iOS now is, much more advanced, but essentially it was still like, that buttery smooth feeling, opening an app, everything working. And this is the big thing about the iPhone. When it was released and it did all those things so well in ways that we'd never seen before, the competition was so far behind. Sure, you could argue that the competitors have caught up somewhat, and they probably have in terms of the camera integration, although the camera wasn't great on the early iPhones. But with camera integration, with a lot of the functionality, the other phones now maybe have caught up, but they still don't have that all-in-one design of hardware and all-in-one design of the operating system on it as well. And the fact that, out of the iPhone, really, you had the whole App Store spawned out of that, where you get pretty good, safe and secure access to apps, which I can assure you doesn't happen in the Android world.
Yeah, absolutely. And spawned a whole subculture of things. There's an app for that.
That's right.
That whole thing. Maybe just to wrap up, Steve, being the 10th anniversary of the iPhone, there's rumors of a super update to the iPhone this year, which, there's always rumors about this, but you would think, given the timing, that Apple might want to try and push to do something along these lines. Whatever it is, a bezel-less iPhone with no buttons, or whatever it is that they're planning on doing. Would you be up for one? I mean, I'm not in the upgrade cycle this year, but would you be up for one?
I could be in the upgrade cycle, but I tend to go for the S version, so maybe still another 12 months for me.
No, you can pick up a 7S then. I'm pretty sure they're going to pump one of those out this year.
I'm not interested. Is that they will go for a 7S?
Yeah, the rumor is that the S versions will get released, but they'll also, in addition to that, create a whole new model to tie in with the 10th anniversary.
7S. I'll be waiting for an 8S or whatever it is they're going to call it. Maybe they call it the X phone.
And a good piece of advice to give to everyone is that you never go for the first rendition of the model that gets released. So it might be a good thing that you're waiting until next year.
That's right. I don't know. Look, I'm sure that they're probably going to release something pretty special. I mean, one thing you can be sure of is it probably doesn't even have any ports. You have to get the iBuds or whatever they are, and you probably get a mat to sit your phone on to charge it or something like that. Or maybe just recharge wirelessly from the friction in your nylon pants. Who knows?
Absolutely. All right, Steve, we'll wrap it up there. So don't forget our website, SciTechCulture.com. You can get all of our links and content there, and subscribe to all our channels, and we'd greatly appreciate that. All right, so that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.